As we just heard, the U.S. president railed against Canadian dairy and lumber industries, claiming the U.S. is being, quote, ripped off.
Once a symbol of American agriculture, the dairy industry now falters right at home. Rather than being shipped off to Europe, Asia, or premium supermarkets, American milk is being dumped near unused farms. Meanwhile, Canada speaks softly but acts decisively and is quietly capturing global market share. Since mid-2025, Canada slapped import duties as high as 300% on U.S. milk that exceeds a small quota under its supply management system designed to protect domestic producers. As a result, over 90% of American milk exported to Canada has been halted. Trucks of U.S. milk have turned back, leaving millions of liters stuck in cold storage in states like Wisconsin, Vermont, and Idaho. Despite falling prices down over 30% in July, demand vanished as consumers grew wary or dismissed it as returned surplus. If you've seen 1-gallon cartons of whole milk drop from $4.20 to $2.90 at stores like Walmart or Kroger, that's not good news. It's a sign that the market is in crisis. With exports to Canada blocked, U.S. dairy entered a downward spiral. Production continued, but buyers disappeared. According to USDA, nearly 1,700 smaller dairy farms risked closure in Q2 2025. America once held 18% of the global dairy market, but by mid-2025, that plunged to under 9%, a two-decade low. This crisis goes beyond farmers. Rural communities that rely on dairy are feeling the pinch. Schools cutting lunches, local stores left empty, banks tightening credit, and jobs vanishing. If you once lived in a small town anchored by a dairy plant, now you may see that plant shuttered, hiring signs removed, and an entire community in limbo. It's not just Canada. Key global partners are turning away U.S. dairy. The European Union added U.S. milk to a retaliatory tariff list, covering $72 billion in exports. Japan and Australia tightened import standards, starting June 2025. The issue isn't quality, it's labeling transparency. Many countries require clear disclosure of growth hormone, RBST, antibiotic use, or farm source labels not mandatory in the U.S. Trucks of milk and cheese are being returned. Much of this excess supply is sold domestically at deep discounts, 1 gallon for as low as $1.80 instead of $3.50. But the real cost is trust. Americans are asking, if others won't buy this milk, what's in it? Confidence in the U.S. dairy industry is eroding. While the U.S. grapples with oversupply and trade retaliation, Canada quietly expands its global dairy footprint through solid planning, supply control, and farm support. Its supply management system limits oversupply, bans growth hormones and excess antibiotics, and ensures full traceability from farm to table. Exported Canadian dairy clearly states these standards, which many importing countries now expect. As a result, Canada has gained market share in Japan, South Korea, the EU, and even the Middle East. Canadian dairy export revenues surpassed 4.2 billion Canadian dollars in the first half of 2025, up nearly 18% from the same period in 2024. While U.S. families shop for those discounted cheese packs or milk jugs, they may not realize local dairy farmers are shutting operations, halting milking, or selling off farms. If this continues, the U.S. dairy sector faces more than lost markets. It risks losing the next generation of farmers once raised on its own family milk. Japan has formally rejected a request from President Donald Trump to increase U.S. rice imports, despite warnings of potential new tariffs. Could this firm stance trigger a deeper escalation in U.S.-Japan trade tensions? The Japanese government announced it would not sacrifice rice farmers to meet U.S. trade demands, even after former President Trump warned of new tariffs if Tokyo failed to increase rice imports from the United States. According to Reuters, Japan imported $110 million USD worth of American rice during the first 4 months of 2025 and nearly $300 million in 2024, a notable rise compared to prior years. Despite that, Tokyo remains committed to its 770,000-ton import quota under WTO agreements and imposes high tariffs on imports exceeding that limit. a safeguard intended to shield domestic agriculture. Japan's stance reflects not only economic policy, but also political strategy. Rice farmers, concentrated in rural prefectures, are a key support base for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP, which faces an important upper house election on July 20. At this critical moment, protecting rural livelihoods and price stability is viewed as a higher priority than making external trade concessions. From a domestic perspective, Tokyo's position aligns with broader concerns about rising food costs and climate-driven supply pressures. With rice prices already under pressure from poor harvests and elevated input costs, Japanese policymakers are focused on maintaining stable agricultural output and shielding consumers from additional volatility. Since the 1970s, Japan has run one of the world's most extensive farm protection programs, including subsidies to reduce rice production. Though officially ended in 2018, the government continues to incentivize shifts to soybeans and other crops to control domestic rice output and prices. In 2024, extended adverse weather reduced crop yields, while rice consumption among younger generations declined. As a result, domestic prices doubled. A 5-kilo bag of rice in Tokyo now costs around $30, placing added strain on households with limited incomes. This shift affects more than grocery bills. Schools and urban families are rethinking traditional meals, turning to cheaper staples like noodles, bread, and imported grains. Long-term, such changes could alter the culinary identity of Japan. While current tensions center on agriculture, broader trade impacts are emerging. In response to tariff threats, Japan imposed a 25% duty on certain U.S. auto and metal exports. With no new bilateral trade deal in place, American industries now face both reduced market access and higher costs. The uncertainty has rippled into financial markets. In early 2025, the U.S. dollar experienced its steepest decline since 1973, driven by concerns over rising federal spending and failed negotiations with key partners like Japan. Meanwhile, Japan's Nikkei 225 index dropped 1.2% following Trump's tariff comments, reflecting investor unease over unclear trade policies. For American consumers, continued friction could lead to higher prices on goods reliant on Japanese parts and materials. States with strong ties to automotive and metal industries may also face job losses and stalled investment if tensions escalate without resolution. Canada is making bold economic moves as U.S. trade policies trigger a wave of responses. Could these changes quietly reshape what Americans buy and how much they pay? In 2024, the Trump administration imposed a 50% tariff on imported aluminum to protect U.S. metal industries. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, prices of aluminum products rose 22% within months. This hit American manufacturers and construction firms hard, especially those reliant on imports. Canada, which supplies over 70% of North America's aluminum, responded strongly. Aluminerie Alouette in Quebec announced a $1.1 billion plant modernization, powered by low-cost clean energy from hydro, Quebec. Quebec's economy minister stated, "The U.S. depends on U.S. for aluminum, and we won't stand by." For Americans, the effects are immediate. The price surge affects home renovation, auto repair, and beverage packaging. Costs on products like soda cans and appliances may rise, adding up to $2.5 billion annually for U.S. consumers. Small businesses in construction and manufacturing face tighter margins and difficult decisions. Canada is rapidly diversifying trade. In early 2024, non-U.S. exports rose 18%, while U.S. bound exports fell to their lowest since the pandemic. Gold exports to the UK jumped over 30%. Crude oil to Singapore hit records, and Italian imports of Canadian aluminum and pharmaceuticals reached all-time highs. Pork exports to Japan rose 13%, with Canadian food favored for its clean, traceable image. As Canada looks beyond the U.S., American buyers risk losing access to key supplies, from metals to pharma ingredients, weakening supply chains, raising costs, and reducing product availability. U.S. consumers may face higher prices or longer wait times for top, quality goods. Canada's Industry Minister Melanie Joly criticized the Trump administration's trade tactics, saying, "We are in a tariff war, and negotiating with the U.S. is tougher than ever." She announced a 3-point response: stronger anti-dumping rules, better liquidity support for industry, and faster project approvals, cut from 5 years to 2. Joly also introduced incentives to attract top researchers, noting, "Canada welcomes talent, especially as academic freedom faces challenges in the U.S. Canada's assertive approach may heighten competition for talent and investment. U.S. universities and tech industries risk a brain drain as researchers and students OPT for Canada's more supportive environment. This could affect American innovation and growth in tech, biotech, and energy. Canada is investing heavily in green energy, hydro, hydrogen, and advanced fuels to lead the global energy shift. High-value exports like battery tech, advanced materials, and aerospace are priorities. The goal? Commercial independence and freedom from Washington's changing moods. If Canada becomes a clean tech and export leader, U.S. industries could lose a key supplier and tech partner. That could mean tougher competition, reduced influence in North America, and, for consumers, fewer options, and higher costs for next-gen products like EVs and energy-efficient appliances.
Auto prices are climbing across the board due to tariffs and supply chain pressures. Could your next car payment stretch your budget beyond comfort? Tariffs and rising input costs have pushed the average new vehicle price up by about $3,000 in 2025, bringing typical sticker prices near $49,000. Reports from Cox Automotive project a 4 to 8% hike in auto prices this year as import duties and materials inflation ripple through the supply chain. Importing a car may now cost $5,700 more under tariff rules, while domestic builds face roughly $1,000 extra in parts costs. Middle-income families, who usually budget $30,000 to $50,000 for a car, are now seeing monthly payments increase by $50 to $70 due to added costs. That eats into family savings, potentially cutting back on vacations, home renovations, emergency funds, or even impacting retirement contributions. New 25% tariffs on auto parts and imported cars have become a sort of hidden tax on U.S. consumers. Imported models may carry up to a $5,700 price bump, while domestic vehicles still see a roughly $1,000 increase as manufacturers pass on parts cost hikes. Additional import taxes on steel and aluminum add $500 to $1,000 to prices. Even Americans shopping for cars labeled Made in USA are affected. Spiking costs. Cut into the options available, buyers get fewer features or need to pay more for financing. Hidden tariff pass-on shrinks trade-in value and forces many to choose longer-term loans, raising financial stress. Although chip shortages have eased since 2023, vehicle production remains below pre-pandemic levels. Cox Automotive warns inventories are tight, empowering dealers to raise prices. Used vehicle values are also staying high due to lowered turnover of lease returns. Average monthly loan payments for new cars reach $742 compared to $525 for used, making new financing less affordable. With fewer budget-friendly models on lots, buyers are turning to older, higher-mile vehicles. That pushes up upkeep and repair bills, especially in rural areas where reliable transportation is essential for work, medical visits, and errands. Use of credit cards to cover maintenance is rising, jeopardizing household finances. Automakers are phasing out entry-level sedans and focusing on higher-margin SUVs and luxury lines. Reports show domestic brands are responding by lengthening financing terms. Many buyers now sign 84-month loans. The average age of cars on American roads is now around 12 years, raising breakdown and repair risks. Insurance premiums are also projected to rise by 19% as repair costs increase due to tariffs. For first-time buyers and single-income households, this means a tougher climb. They end up either settling for older, less reliable cars or taking on long loans that stretch beyond planned budgets. Extended financing increases the risk of default or repossession, and older cars result in higher insurance, more roadside breakdowns, and diminished peace of mind for commuting or caregiving responsibilities.